the man who led America to victory in the Revolutionary War, became the first President of the United States. But how did George Washington become the father of his country? Hey there, welcome to my channel, and today we're looking at the life of George Washington, the first President of the United States. Before we get started, if you want more videos like this one, please click that subscribe button. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was the eldest son of Augustine Washington and Mary Ball Washington. George had a younger half-brother and sister through his father and 4 siblings with his mother. His father owned a modest plantation and was a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses. As a planter, he grew tobacco on his land, which helped make Virginia and other southern colonies wealthy, but he was not particularly rich or powerful. When George was 11 years old, his father died from tuberculosis, forcing George to take on more responsibilities on the plantation and mature more quickly. Unlike many wealthy young men of the time, George did not attend college. Instead, he began learning the art of surveying land from his older half-brother, Lawrence. It was around this time that he developed an interest in math and geography, which helped him hone his surveying skills. At 18, George began surveying land along the Potomac River for the Virginia Council. This job gave him intimate knowledge of the land and waterways that would be important later in his life. That same year, he was appointed as a Justice of the Peace for Culpeper County, Virginia. He also began surveying land in Western Virginia, where he spent much of his time outdoors and away from women. During this period of his life, his mother died. Though they had a good relationship, she was strict and often critical of him. Some historians believe that her death contributed to George's marrying Martha Dandridge Curtis. Martha was a wealthy widow with 2 young children. The marriage was a good match for both of them, and it is one of the most famous in American history. Their combined wealth allowed them to run a large plantation with hundreds of slaves. George and Martha had no children together, but he formed close relationships with her 2 children and became a father figure to them. In addition to managing a plantation, George also served in the Virginia House of Burgesses and the Continental Congress. These positions required him to travel to Williamsburg and Philadelphia, where he met other leaders from across the colonies. Many of these men would become his close friends and allies, and together they would lead the colonies to independence. Though George was not a radical, tensions between the colonies and Britain were rising. When news of the French attack on the Ohio Valley reached him, while he was surveying in Western Virginia, he was ordered to deliver a message to the French forces to warn them to leave. Though the trip was dangerous, he completed it successfully and returned home a local hero. As tensions continued to rise, George was appointed as a militia officer in the Virginia Regiment. In 1754, at the beginning of the French and Indian War, he led a small force to the Ohio Valley to try to stop the French from building forts there. The British and colonial forces were unprepared and were defeated by the French and their Native American allies. This defeat made him unpopular in Virginia because many believed that he had unnecessarily endangered his men. However, this defeat would help make him a better leader in the long run. During the rest of the war, George gradually gained experience leading larger forces. He learned the importance of logistics and supply lines, the necessity of discipline, and the value of alliances with Native American tribes. By the end of the war, though, the French had built several forts in the Ohio Valley, and British efforts to remove them had failed. Many colonists felt betrayed by the British and began calling for independence. Though George still hoped for reconciliation, he realized that war might be inevitable. In 1774, delegates from the colonies met at the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. There George helped draft a list of grievances against the British and a plan for further colonial resistance. He left the Congress believing that war would soon begin. He spent the next year preparing for conflict. Though he did not believe that slavery should continue, he reluctantly decided to keep the slaves on his plantation, to keep it economically viable. He appointed managers to oversee the plantation while he went to war. He then set out to join the fight for independence. In 1775, the Continental Congress appointed him Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. At this point, the colonies had not yet declared independence, but it was clear that war with Britain was imminent. When he accepted the position, he knew that he would lead an inexperienced, poorly equipped army against one of the most powerful militaries in the world. Despite these odds, he was determined to win. He traveled to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to meet with his troops. Most of the soldiers were militiamen who had never fought in a formal war. They lacked weapons, ammunition, and supplies. Despite these hardships, they had high morale and were eager to fight for independence. George admired their spirit and worked hard to provide them with what they needed to succeed. During the winter of 1777, the Continental Army endured a brutal winter at Valley Forge. The men were starving and freezing, and many deserted the army. George struggled to keep the army together, but he was determined to succeed. He worked hard to improve their living conditions and train them to become better soldiers. His efforts paid off, and the Continental Army eventually became a well-trained, disciplined fighting force. On Christmas night in 1776, he led his men across the icy Delaware River. The surprise attack caught the Hessians off guard and resulted in a decisive victory for the Americans. This victory boosted morale and convinced France to become an American ally. With the help of the French Navy and Army, the Americans were able to wear down the British and force them to surrender. On October 19, 1781, George Washington led his troops into Yorktown, Virginia. British General Cornwallis surrendered his army to him. This final victory secured American independence. News of the victory spread throughout the colonies. People celebrated in the streets, and George was lifted up as a national hero. He had led the ragtag group of farmers and tradesmen to victory against a global superpower. He embodied the ideals of liberty and perseverance that the nation was founded upon. After the war, he attended the Constitutional Convention and worked with other leaders to create a new government for the United States. In 1789, the Electoral College met to vote for the first President of the United States. George Washington was unanimously elected. He took office on April 30, 1789, and set important precedents for future presidents. He created the Presidential Cabinet, established the two-term limit, and created the system of political parties. He supported financial systems to stabilize the new nation's economy. He also asked Congress to establish a national bank, which they did in 1791. He appointed a new mint to regulate and coin money, and he appointed Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury to manage the debt from the Revolutionary War. He also faced challenges during his presidency. The first serious test of his presidency came when France went to war with Britain again and asked the United States for assistance. As a pro-slavery advocate himself, he was also criticized for not doing more to end slavery. However, he did support the abolition of slavery in the Northwest Territory. Perhaps his greatest accomplishment was persuading the first Congress to pass the Bill of Rights, which guarantees certain freedoms to all Americans. In his farewell address, he warned against political parties and foreign entanglements. He advised future leaders to always put the good of the country before personal gain. He did not seek a third term in office, and voluntarily stepped down on March 4, 1797. This action established the peaceful transfer of power from one president to another, a tradition that has continued to this day. After leaving office, he returned to his plantation at Mount Vernon. Though he had left public life, he remained an influential voice in American politics. His farewell address became one of the most important documents in American history. he continued to grow crops on his plantation and manage his estate. He also welcomed visitors from around the world who came to pay homage to the father of his country. On December 14, 1799, he suffered a stroke and died 2 days later. He was buried on his plantation in Mount Vernon. His death was a national event. People from all over the United States came to pay their respects to the man who had led them to independence and become their first president. So what can we learn from George Washington? He set an example of leadership, courage, and unwavering commitment to his country. He showed us that with hard work and determination, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. As we look back on his life and legacy, let us be inspired by his example and strive to make our country a better place for all. Alright, that's all for this video. What did you think? Leave me a comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe.